Welcome YouTubers to NowYouSeeTV. This is Jon Pounders, and today I'm interviewing a very special guest. I've had him on several times. He's become a good friend. We've met up in Nashville, talked, and did video interviews, and we're going to be discussing another chapter. I know this is probably mirrored, it looks like, but another chapter in Genesis 6 Conspiracy, and we're going to be discussing Azazel, the leader of the Watchers. Welcome, Gary, to the show.
Well, thank you for having me tonight. I'm very happy to be here on your video broadcast, and I think you've picked a subject that, a lot of people have thought about, maybe heard the name, don't really make the connections or understand who Azazel actually was and what kind of impact he had on ancient history and, perhaps all throughout our history.
Yeah, man, no doubt. I know when I first read the book of Enoch, that was, obviously he stuck out, and I've kind of, I still don't 100% know everything, but the link between him and Satan himself, and if he is Satan himself, I don't even know that either. So this is going to be really interesting to talk about for me, because I've kind of wrestled around with that idea if he's actually Lucifer himself or what he is. So, but yeah, man, I know
certainly has very, very close connections with Satan, and even in the imagery, he seems to be meshed with Satan. It's my opinion, though, that we are talking about a very powerful fallen angel, but someone that is sort of lower in the pecking order and was one of the followers of Lucifer in the rebellion, maybe the leader of the Watchers, but nonetheless less in prestige and hierarchy than what Lucifer was.
So you believe, and I tend to believe this as well, that the angels that actually came down to Mount Hermon and the angels that fought in heaven and left, the tens of thousands of angels that came with Lucifer, are two completely separate groups.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, they're part of the same group, actually.
Okay.
I think that all of them were part of the rebellion. There are different orders of, dark angels in the rebellion, but certainly Azazel would have been the leader of the Watchers. There's no doubt about that in my mind, and I think there's so many things in the ancient texts and in the book of Enoch that actually state that, and I actually state that in the chapter in the book that you're in my book that you're referring to. And another interesting thing is about Azazel is there was another very, very famous angel that is often tied to Azazel, and his name is Shemyaz. And he's identified differently, but as my research went, I found a number of sources that suggested that they were split into two sort of different personalities, but were actually one angel. And so it's basically telling the same story about Azazel, even though you have to be aware that Shemyaz may be the other name that would apply to this very, very famous, make that infamous angel of antediluvian history that most people aren't really aware of what his impact was.
Right. So, the name sounds familiar. It sounds like the guy from the Smurfs. Is that what that guy's name was? What, like Azazel or Azazel or something? Well, I can't remember.
It's amazing how often Azazel or Azazel is used in entertainment or in areas that just sort of come out of nowhere that you wouldn't expect. So, and what's interesting about Azazel is it's the same spelling as if you left out the I there and spelled Azazel. And that is recorded in the Old Testament and in Deuteronomy as the scapegoat. And that's a very, very, very interesting term for the scapegoat, because Azazel was, in other traditions, charged with the chief destroyer and bringing on all of the wars and the destruction of the antediluvian world, and was the so-called scapegoat to be hung in Orion as punishment for destroying the ancient world. Wow. And what is also very interesting in the Old Testament, and part of the feasts and festivals that they would do is there's one that people will be very familiar with called the Day of Atonement.
Right.
And on the Day of Atonement, 2 goats, Azazel, were sacrificed. One for the sins of the Israelites and one for the sins of the world. And so in that tradition and in Jewish tradition, that supports that name Azazel and the sacrifices atoning for the antediluvian sins.
Right. Yeah, so I guess one question I had about them, and I know you cover almost everything in your book, so I mean, I'm not bringing anything up to you that's new or anything that really is new to me, but I'm trying to, like, kind of, the people that are listening don't know everything that's probably in this book, and I know a lot of people that have listened have bought your book and that continue to listen. I got Jake Rahutsky calling me from Seek for Truth right now. We're not gonna answer that, but anyways, what kind of angels were the Watchers in Azazel?
They were from the order of the seraphim angels, and many people will know the Watchers as Grigori, which is just a translation of the Watchers into Greek as being Grigori, or S. Grigori, as I'll note in the book. So they were the Watchers, and what the Watchers did is they were a liaison between heaven and earth, and also the rulers of the earth. And if we look at Deuteronomy 32 and look at what is actually being said there, where it goes back to the division of the earth that was divided amongst the sons of Israel, what we have to look at is the alternative translation, because out of the Masoretic text or the Septuagint or other Bible versions on the translations, it will offer sons of God, which again will be the Watchers out of Genesis 6, right. Or they'll say, as another translation, is other gods, which again would go back to being the same thing. And at that point, if you look at the wording that goes right back into prehistory, in the days of old, on generations long past, well before Israel was created, the earth was split into zones or segments that these Watchers would rule over. And so this would be one of the references to the Watchers, and Azazel in particular being the leader of the Watchers, that they were the hostile rulers of the universe and the Archons of the earth, because depending on who you talk to, there could have been 7 cult centers in the ancient world, from Sumeria to you can name a number of other mythologies that also say that there was antediluvian worlds, but they ruled over these, and they would have a temple, and they would have sacrifices, and they would have their religion set up there. And so they not only governed the earth, but they would report back to God what was happening on the earth. And so they had a very, very, very important role until they decided that they would no longer accept the divine inheritance promised to the Adamites.
The fact that they were here before they fell, before they decided to sin against God and man and beasts and everything like that. So they were kind of like a liaison between heaven and earth in a way.
They were, yes. That's exactly what a large part of their commission was. And they would also present themselves before the Lord on a regular basis. So when we look at prehistory, we have to consider what was going on with these seraphim angels, what their role was, and then why Jesus visited them in the abyss during the 3 days he was in the grave, to tell them that their struggle was over, that only time was going to prevent them from having their judgment, even though they're going to be released again in the last days out of the abyss. But it's important to know that they were trying to prevent humankind from inheriting the promise God gave to Adam and his descendants. And if we look at so many different aspects of prehistory, some things start to come clear when we understand that these seraphim angels had that viper look, that they looked like a serpent, they looked like a lizard. You name what description you want to apply to what a snake or a viper or a lizard or a crocodile or the different incantations of that look would be. And then you start to think about, well, what's that connection if the earth was only renewed in Genesis 1, which is the other way of interpreting Genesis 1:1, that this was a renewal of the earth, that maybe the dinosaurs were their preferred type of beings beforehand. And if that's the case, was there an intelligent being that was their preferred being that was ruling the earth for them? And then when we roll forward to Eden, and we understand that the serpent in Eden was the most intelligent or craftiest animal before the Eden incident. So how much of a thinking being was this? Obviously lower in seniority than Adam, but perhaps it was the highest order that the Watchers had preferred. And that's part of the reason why they were taking their revenge, to take the inheritance away from them and their preferred orders of beings. I know this is a bit of a, I'm connecting some dots and making some connections here, but, the logic seems to be there that there was something going on this. And if we look at what happened to the serpent in Eden, this serpent obviously had the ability to communicate with Adam and Eve, and so it had the ability to have speech. And we also were told that the speech was taken away from him for his participation in Eden, and his arms and his legs were taken away. So this was a being that probably walked upright. Some may have even had wings that, would be, again, more equivalent to a physical animal dragon perspective.
Right.
And in other traditions and in other religions like the Gnostics, they believe that the serpent was a highly intelligent animal. It was larger than a human being, that it could walk, it could do an extraordinary amount of work, it could speak, and it was about the size of a camel. And it was the senior sort of being before the creation of the Adamites and the inheritance that they received from God. So again, with the fall in Eden, and with the fall of the serpent and having the legs hacked off and being forced to crawl on the ground and not having any sort of inheritance into eternity after the 1,000-year reign, this leads, and let me back step one more. And when we look at what God had said between Eve and the serpent, that they would be at odds, that the serpent's seed would be at odds with humankind, all of this seems to be a plausible connecting story for now what happens in Genesis 6, where Azazel leads the 200 Watchers to Mount Hermon, and they begin their violation against the laws of creation by putting immortal spirit into the physical realm and into humans where it's not permitted, and thus we have the Nephilim, and that would be the second revenge.
Right. And so there was 200 that he led on this, and you think they were all seraphims as well, right?
Yes, they were, yes.
Okay. And according to the book of Enoch, obviously they taught him all kinds of different things, such as abortion, even like down to makeup and different, and obviously, like we've talked about before, the sciences, the 7 sacred sciences and all that. Is there anything else notable about, I guess, about the teachings that they had? I know we've talked about a lot of this before, but just for the sake of the people that haven't listened to, the other shows yet.
So they would have been a very, very big part with their cult centers and the Nephilim kings that came thereafter, and the Enochian mysticism. Right. And so they would have been guiding and helping the descendants of Cain, and then later the kings from the giants, to developing this religion. And within this religion was secreted the advanced knowledge of the 7 sciences that they took to all sorts of different levels. And so many think, and certainly in Freemasonry legends, that they believe that Enoch was responsible for the building of the pyramids. And the pyramids also, if you look from an allegory perspective, is a recreation of Mount Hermon. Right. Where, so it's a monument to what happened on Mount Hermon, just as Babel would have been a recreation and inviting the angels perhaps back either through a stargate, which is the Bab-El Akkadian translation of Babel, as opposed to the Hebrew translation where Babel is the confusion of languages. So when we look at the imagery and the capabilities and the knowledge, those are clear examples coming out of those cult centers that were led by the gods that they worship, which were those seraphim angels that rebelled in the rebellion and took out the revenge with the Nephilim on the second revenge. And if we look at some of the things that Azazel specifically taught, abortion is attributed to Azazel specifically as one of the illicit knowledges taught to women. And when we look at the ruthlessness of the Nephilim and the warrior state and how the antediluvian world would have slipped back into chaos and war, we need to understand that it was Azazel in particular who took the lead, who taught military and tactics, martial arts, to train these armies for battle. He is the one that introduced war, for the most part, in, let's say, a more technologically organized way for the descendants of Cain and the Nephilim kings. So wow. He had a significant piece of the debauchery and the degradation of the antediluvian world, and just teaching unbridled knowledge without any controls with laws or regulations or the applications thereof.
Yeah. So they how long? This is a question that I had that I was thinking would be a pretty good question. But how long was their reign after them teaching these sciences and after them copulating with the females and all that and the animals?
Well, we know that the Nephilim came in Jarrett's generation. Right. So if you look at that, then that's somewhere, and you're testing my math and my recollection, I think that was about 600 years in. So, wow. I think we're probably talking about a 400-year to 500-year reign, doing the rough math on that.
And that's the parts where they're doing all the wrong things for 400 years.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. I didn't realize it was that long. So you could, like, when you read the Bible and you read Enoch, it just doesn't, like, I guess you don't think about the longevity of what's going on there, but it just seems like, it was like yesterday they're out doing this, today they're bound and chained. So,
Yeah. So even if my math is out without going out and doing the generations, we'd be talking 300 years. So it whether or not I'm out 100 years or not doesn't make a whole lot of difference. There's a lot of time to spread this corruption around the world. And when we look at mythologies that come from the Greek mythology or the Sumerian mythology or the Gnostic religions, they have a take that these Nephilim giants, who were the puppets for the dark angels, were a very good and intelligent and kind and benevolent set of rulers, whereas the Bible and anything that we would know about Nephilim, that they weren't. And so their reasoning for that is after they got through the first generation and were more influenced by humans and perhaps knew the flood was coming, or as the second generation came in and the third generation of new giants being born in the world from the original generation, that the human nature overcame them and they became more corrupt, and to the point where all they wanted to do was war and slaughter people and drink blood and a bunch of horrific things that the Nephilim were known to do for. And again, in the Greek mythology and in Atlantis in particular, Atlantis was the helm of the world government with 10 empires. And that they were trying to absolutely take over the world. So one would presume that there was a leader of the Nephilim at that time who would be like an antichrist figure to enslave humankind at that point in time. Right. Also in Plato, he acknowledges, though, that they were checked by the Athenians of ancient Greece, and so didn't achieve that, and destruction came thereafter with the flood and a series of cataclysmic events that came along with it.
Okay, so these Nephilim were, like, you heard gods versus I guess, demigods and stuff like that, where the Titan rebellion and all that stuff, were they fighting the actual fallen angels as well, the seraphs?
Well, in the Greek mythology, is the Titans revolted against the gods, and they actually won the first set of wars, and then Zeus stepped in and put down the rebellion and had other heroes or titans fight with them, such as Hercules and a few of
Poseidon
those.
And all those people. Yeah.
Well, Poseidon would have been one of the god that would have helped Zeus put down. But when we talk about Theseus or Perseus, those were some of the so-called good Nephilim that were fighting with fallen angels. If you can call them good, it's a matter of perspective. That would have been fought to put it down. So if we look at Nephilim as being evil, potent tyrants and despots, and yet there was even a significant amount that were even worse than those ones. I wonder how bad that world was with these absolutely barbaric monsters that were running amok in the antediluvian world.
Yeah, and I imagine they may have been worse than their parents, because I know that one time, I guess in the book of Enoch, they were asking Enoch to go before God and intercede for him. So I mean, they had a conscience, at least we know that much. Whereas the Nephilim didn't seem to really care. They didn't seem to care.
Yeah. And I think they probably knew they were never going to be led in heaven, because they were called, as I think in Enoch, the reprobate spirits.
Right.
And although I'm not all that convinced that you couldn't be saved through Jesus, but they perhaps thought that is not possible. I'll leave that for God and Jesus to decide. Yes. Yeah. And that when they found out that their bodies weren't immortal, you can only imagine the rage that would happen, that they would be these bodiless spirits that would be roaming the earth until the end time.
Yeah.
And when we look at these bodiless spirits that we know as demons, we now understand the hero cult worship that went on in antediluvian Greece and thereafter, that when their Nephilim died out and the spirit would remain with them for a while, that they would worship them. But this demon would come back and would not be, again, a benevolent spirit to that community. It would be haunting them, and they would be trying to appease it all the time. Yeah. And this same tradition is also noted in Taoism as well.
Yeah.
It's the exact same hero worship cult that went on with the Nephilim of their area of the world as well.
Right. Yeah, and there's still plenty of tribes out there that do it today. They're African tribes that do it. I know I was talking to a friend of mine. He's a missionary to South Africa, and the Zulu there, they've kind of mixed some of I guess the Catholic religion, Christian religion, mix it with their religion, and they have like kind of a Santeria type thing. But before that, they were, they would, every plague that ever happened, every, just horrible thing that happened, they would attribute to these demons that were, it might have been, who knows. But yeah, that's still going on in certain parts of the world.
They are, and people say, well, are demons real? Well, I think we just have to go to the New Testament, where Jesus talked about demons and expelled demons all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And in the one major set, known as Legion, were frightfully afraid that Jesus was going to send them to the abyss, where their patriarchs, the dark angels who had committed the sexual sins, were already committed to. Yeah. So we know that they're real. And another aspect of these cult centers and Azazel and the Watchers is the bull cult. And
Say it again.
The bull cult. B-U-L-L.
Okay. The bull cult. Okay. You said
C-U-L-T. Yeah,
I got
cult.
You.
And it worked in partnership in its allegory and religion in the antediluvian world with the sun cult. Mm-hmm. And if we look at Azazel is always pictured with those cloven hooves, just as Lucifer is. And we look at Azazel, he also has the horns, and just as the Minotaur does. And so this was part of the bull cult. And the bull cult was a significant part of the Atlantean religion, according to Plato. And they used to sacrifice they're in the bull cult, and actually drink the blood of the bullet as well.
Wow.
And other animals and other human beings and other horrible things. But so when we look at this bull cult, this is the bull cult that cropped up in the Exodus, just as it's the same bull cult of ancient Egypt in the worship of the Apis bull. And the golden calf that we saw in the Exodus. And then when they moved into the Baal worship of the Canaanites, and the bull was still a major aspect in with Molech, the son of Baal. And they used to sacrifice children to this I guess, not really a demigod, but probably in actuality was a demigod, probably a Nephilim, but raised to God status, but nonetheless the son of Baal, and they used to sacrifice children to them. And this is the cult that Elijah fought against and continually resurged, and Solomon set up monuments to in his time, and it was just a plague on the ancient Israelites. And what's significant about connecting Moloch with the bull cult and Azazel is also the Minotaur and the Quinotaur mythologies of Greek, because the Minotaur was in the Serapis maze, the labyrinth. And again, notice that word Serapis, as in seraphim. And in that mythology, of course, a half human, half bull was created because of what King Minos had done to upset Poseidon. And I'm not going to recount the whole legend, but essentially this was the punishment that there was going to be this Minotaur, and they would have to bring these children into the maze to satisfy the Minotaur, who used to eat the babies and the little children. Wow. This is the same bull cult that was part, and sun cult that was part of the 7 cult centers of the antediluvian world, that somehow crosses the flood and somehow continues, and actually continues today because it's the same religion.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Some of the stuff that you, obviously they believed this stuff to a point, and it was real enough to them to sacrifice their babies and do all these things. And I know that, it's obvious that it continues today. I mean, just look at our government, look at the symbols that are everywhere, look at, I know a lot of people want to, chalk almost everything up to mythology, but I mean, the Bible, forget about the other stuff right now. I mean, you got the Bible, Genesis 6, you got the book of Enoch, you've got, in the New Testament, talking about demonic figures. You've got, just it's all through the scripture that it talks about this type of thing, and Nephilim are all throughout the scripture. So, if people are thinking, oh, it's just a bunch of mythology, I mean, it's in mythology as well, but it's definitely in the Bible that you read as well too. So
yeah, if you actually believe in the Bible, you need to believe in the supernatural aspects that is absolutely filled throughout the scripture, right from the beginning right to the last book. It's just something you need to come to grips with. You either accept the literal word of God or you don't.
Yeah, and most people don't. The Old Testament, they don't read it anyway. It's done away with and no good to them anymore. So they don't even know what's in it. And it's a shame, but yes,
it is, because when you get into the if you understand the Old Testament, you understand so many things about the New Testament, but you also understand what took place in the Old Testament. And when people look at what happened in the conquest and the wars and the slaughter of the people there, people don't connect that these were the Nephilim that were in the land that had laid an ambush to wipe Israel out from the face of the earth so that they could not produce the Messiah, which would put an end to their rebellion. And secondly, the religion they were wiping out was this Enochian sun cult, bull cult religion that crossed the flood that plagued the covenant land as well. The land separated by God, and they were not only mocking, but they were degrading the land of the covenant, and they knew full well what they were doing. Now, fallen angels won't do that, but they'll use human beings and lower forms of beings that they may or may not have created to do these types of things, because they know the full nature of God's capability, and they don't want to bring that wrath on them any sooner than what is already coming.
Yeah, and they, if they, I guess the Bible that talks about how, if they would have known the plan of the Messiah before he died, they would never put him to death, and so their whole plan kind of like crumbled at that point. But now they have a certain amount of time to do a certain amount of things. I think they can still win. I don't know. Like, I mean, maybe the demons don't think so, but I think that there's a certain thought in their head that they can win. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's certainly the belief system that they put forward.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they did rebel, so they thought either God would have mercy on them and let them live in another realm or dimension or universe or whatever. But they certainly full well knew the power of God, and yet they did rebel. So they must have thought there was an avenue to survive, you would think, or somehow were so persuaded by Lucifer that he could actually defeat God, which seems impossible to me. So to me, there must have been another avenue that they were hoping would be a resolution to the conflict through something through free choice, that God would have mercy and let them continue.
Yeah, no, like in the book of Jasher, they talk about the Stargate, and the whole Tower of Babel was like a Stargate type thing, and their whole goal was to go through it and storm the throne room of God. Yes. And and obviously it was probably a deception, just like the serpent deceived Adam. And the serpent probably deceived Nimrod with the same kind of ideas, mindset. But the people that are behind these religions definitely believe it, whether or not Lucifer himself or Azazel or any of them believe that they can win. They probably don't. Yeah, they probably don't. They probably know, like, because when you look in Isaiah, when it talks about he's in what, I don't know. There's a lot of like confusion for me in certain aspects of like Satan versus the Antichrist, I guess, in Isaiah, because it talks about he said, they use the word man. It said, who is this man that deceived the entire world? And it sounds like he's talking to Lucifer in the chapter, but then he uses the word man that deceives the entire world. That's why there was a confusion to me whether or not like Azazel was actually Satan, he was bound right now, and I know that it says he's loose, a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour, but there's that confusion. And also that talks about him being bored with was it pipes? He had pipes in basically ingrained into his body when he was born, which makes me think he was a different type of seraph, I guess.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of confusion there for me, and I still, like, when I study it, I'm still like, I don't know what's going on here, but...
well, certainly Lucifer was a greater order of seraphim, and he was also considered archangel as well. And so he was, obviously there's a few angels that are more powerful than Lucifer, like Michael and perhaps Gabriel, but there's maybe only 7 that might be able to take him on. So he could certainly present a delusion that there's a possibility to win. But I believe that their end game is to find a way to continue to survive and not be put in internal torment, because they obviously knew if they lost what the outcome would likely be. Yeah. So I think, part of what our journey is as humans on the earth is we're part of this whole rebellion and things playing out, and that if Lucifer can prove that humans will totally revolt and rebel against God, then that'll justify their free choice in rebellion against God, and maybe come to some sort of amicable relationship. That's the only way I can, in my mind, kind of rationalize why you would go up against the all-powerful.
Yeah, and they probably know they're already screwed, according to my terminology, and then they're thinking, like, I'm going to bring these people down with me. God made them in His image. I hate His image. I'm going to show them that He's.
That's all they have left, really.
That's all they got.
And I think Jesus made that very clear to them when He visited them, the imprisoned dark angels in the abyss. So I think, if you look at the other religions that are out there, is they have this duality aspect to their religion. And it's duality in two ways. One is male and female, in the lower level, just below the universal life force. And the other one is good and evil. And in their belief system, good and evil are two equally balanced forces that are always pushing against, but neither can ever get control over the other. If they get some, it's only temporary, and it's this constant cosmic balance, as they'll refer to. And so they believe that, or what they teach in that religion is that, and their belief obviously is that God and Lucifer are equals. One good, one evil. Now they believe Lucifer is good and God is evil, which is the absolute inside-out role reversal of what we believe. But they believe that they are equal, and actually that Lucifer has the ability to free humankind, because he is the freer of humankind with knowledge and from the laws and the rules, and that free choice ought to rule through the universe. And it's true, we need to choose God, and that's the free choice, but they want to set up a world that chooses to be separate from God. And that really is sort of the choice. But yeah, that's why when the delusion comes in the end time, everybody is to be brainwashed as to what has happened and what will be presented, that you need to fight in this rebellion to take your seat at the galactic table of other aliens or species that are also fighting for their freedom from the oppressive Adonai, as they will call our God, and use that as a sort of a slanderous term to bring them down to Lucifer's level. They know, even in Freemasonry, whether it's Albert Pike speaking, they know God is there, but they would prefer to not have God, but they believe Lucifer is God's equal. So there's the balance.
And even in today, even more, the deception's even more tempting for people, I think, because we're on the verge of transhumanism. We're on the verge of technology that can get rid of like the thing that causes us to die in the DNA, and to be able to change DNA. So people need to be aware of this stuff, because like I said, right now, it's a very tempting time to think, well, God gives me eternal life, but I have to live the way He wants me to live. And then there's the man, or Lucifer, whoever, in their mind it's man, it's science that's done this, but they can live forever with transhumanism. They can just download their information into a robot, or they can change their DNA to where they live, and obviously we're on the verge of that. I mean, technology increases, and most people would think, oh, you're crazy for thinking that, but think about the steps we've made over the last few years, and over the last 50 years. We went from riding horses, a little more than 100 years ago, to spaceships and computers that can hold terabytes of information, and just more than that, so. Which
is why I think the civilizations were so advanced just before the flood. And if we look at what's happened in the last 100 to 150 years in our civilization, why couldn't that have happened in the last 100 years in their civilization? And secondly, if we look at Jesus's words on this, is the days of Noah will be like the end time. I mean, you would think that parallel is a very general statement, that then everything would be in a similar sort of fashion. And that's why I think Azazel isn't just mythology, and was the leader of the Watchers, and his mythos has been kept alive because it's fact, and he is in prison. And if we go to even the Sinclair, the famous Sinclairs of Scotland, and Roslin Chapel, which is, in some people's view, a scaled down version of what the old First Temple was. I'm not sure I buy that, but that's one of the people's views on it. But it is a monument to the start of Freemasonry, and sort of a connection between the old and the new organizations. And what people don't understand is about that chapel, it is a story written in stone. And it is telling a story, and everything is in allegories and statues. And part of the statue is this angel that is hung upside down, with an S or a Z, the rope trailing away to stand for Azazel. And it's got these pearls, a pearl necklace that I can't remember whether they're broken or they're just wrapped around the neck, but that stands for the pearls of wisdom. Yeah. This is embedded in that other belief system. Yeah. And they're going to keep Azazel alive in terms of the religion and its importance to their different religions and organizations, because we know that in the end time, these fallen angels are going to be released from the abyss. Yeah. And more importantly, that angel, who is the leader of those angels of the abyss, is called Abaddon or Apollyon, depending on which language you're using, and that translates as the destroyer, right, which is likely Azazel. Yeah. And then when we go a little bit more forward into Revelation and we look at the Antichrist, and he's described in a very, very strange way, you know, the beast who once was, right, now is not, and will come again, and comes out of the abyss. Yeah. I think Azazel actually at some point in time as an avatar or possession takes over the Antichrist after the Antichrist seizes power.
It's an interesting way to look at it. I've never really thought of it that way. I've thought of it a couple different ways, but that's an interesting way to look at it. I know I've toyed with the idea that it's actually Nimrod. You know, they genetically brought him back as Nimrod. But that makes pretty much sense, because I don't think Nimrod's from the pit. You know, if he was human, 100%, I'm not 100% sold on the idea he was, but
yeah. So. Certainly I would call the Antichrist the new Nimrod, because he's going to do what Nimrod tried to do.
All right. So, yeah, man, it's super interesting. Like when I think about a lot of this stuff, I just, you know, your mind could go a million different places with it, because it's so ingrained. We were talking about having their religion. It has two meanings. I know it brings me to a Led Zeppelin song, you know, the Stairway to Heaven, where everything has two meanings. And yes. and I was looking at the backstory behind that. They actually did that he did a seance to write that song, kind of like script writing, where he just writes and writes. And he did it in Aleister Crowley's old house that he had bought. So where they performed many of demonic rituals and stuff in there. So. I was just looking at that at my phone just a second ago. I was like, man, I remember some kind of story about that, but it's pretty interesting. And
yeah, it's amazing what kind of influence Crowley had for. Yeah. And I know a lot of people aren't that familiar with him, but I mean, he had a heavy influence on Nazi Germany and in support of Nazi Germany.
Yeah, that's one thing I was wanting to talk to you about some other shows and talk about the Third Reich and all that stuff, because that's like highly. To me, it's like just something that piques my interest. I don't know how interested a lot of other people are in it, but I think it's like all that stuff. Yeah, Aleister Crowley was a big influence on a lot of people. I mean, but anyway, I think the guy that bought his house, I think he ended up like dying of some kind of crazy experience. He was going through crazy demonic trauma and everything, and the house was like supposedly just completely just filled with demons. You know, just completely nuts with that stuff. But
yeah. And Crowley looked at himself as an Antichrist figure. Yeah. He actually thought he could be the rising Antichrist at the time. And he felt his avatar, I believe, was Horus.
Horus, wow.
Yeah.
He I know he drew he had the picture of the alien that he talked to. I can't remember what he called it, but it looked like a gray alien that he had contact with. And it was a demon, I guess, and that's one of the first pictures that I've I think one of the first pictures I've noticed of like a full sketch gray alien. You know, it just looks just like one, but that guy was definitely in some deep black magic, and you know, and he was open about it, because I guess at the time he was a wealthy guy. He could kind of do whatever he wanted to do, and he did. I mean, he was a part of some of the biggest organizations, you know, at the time. So, and you know, it makes me wonder how many people are doing it right now behind closed doors. If he did it so openly, like how many people are doing some of that stuff, you know.
I think it goes on a lot more than what people think, obviously, behind closed doors. But if you look at, the Leviathan and web of the organizations that are all working towards one goal and are working off the same play sheet, and if these are part of their beliefs and their rituals, then it's going on all the time.
Oh yeah, and you're getting information, and that's probably one of the reasons the knowledge increase. I know, I know that one invention kind of leads to another type thing, but it just seems like such a knowledge explosion in the last 100 years comparison to history that we know of.
It's unprecedented.
Yeah, it is. It's unreal. So
I know 20 years ago they used to say that knowledge was increasing, or was doubling every 5 years.
Yeah.
Well, if that was the case 20 years ago, what's the rate of knowledge and information expansion today? Does it double every year?
I don't know, man. It's crazy, dude. I've said, the guys from Skywatch you were talking about, but he bought some kind of DNA thing, and to show that they can change DNA, they have a way to insert certain DNA into certain things while people are alive or embryonic, and just stuff like that, man. That's unreal to me. I know that obviously it happened before the flood. I mean, you're talking about, the half man, half cow, half whatever, and then they have, and then the humans that were increased.
Well, and the classic one is the centaurs.
Yeah, centaurs.
Yeah, and then the classic relationship to perhaps an alien sort of connection is that the centaurs were created in a cloud.
Yeah.
And so there was obviously a DNA manipulation to make that happen.
Yeah.
And it makes me think that, again, if that was prevalent in the antediluvian age, it should be seen in the end time.
Yeah.
And we're on the cusp of being able to do that, whether it's through an alien influence or our own ability to do it.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, and it's not going to be that far away.
Yep.
So again, I think I look at that as just another sort of sign of the end time, that we need to look back to the antediluvian epoch to see what happened.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And people need to be aware that, to be aware of this stuff for a couple of reasons, like we talked about. But, things are heating up. And, I don't know, I'm sure you've saw about Oregon, about the armed gunmen that have, I guess, the militia group that have taken over the wildlife preserve in Oregon.
Yes.
And I don't necessarily blame them for what they're doing, but this is right before Obama was getting ready to try to do an executive order about guns. And I know you're in Canada, so it doesn't affect you as much, but it kind of does because you guys are right next door. But we've got that going on. We've got, how easy would it be for another Waco to happen? And all it would take is a couple events like that to just cause people to want to take up arms against the government. And I mean, let's face it, unless you got Harrier jets and aircraft missiles and all that, you're not going to win with a bunch of guns. I mean, if you went to the Capitol with 10 million people with guns, all it takes is a Harrier jet standing there just hovering over, it could kill thousands of people in one swipe. So, it's going to cause, and then you got the racial issues, the race wars that they're trying to make happen.
If I can just sort of back up on the gun issue, and the gun issue, I mean, there are compelling arguments to why there should be gun laws and tracking of it, and to whatever level that people want to do that. But here's the thing that is that's very, very disturbing when you get down to it, and I know most Americans know their history and why they have the right to bear arms, so that nobody could come in with an army, or your own government couldn't enslave you because you don't have any weapons. And if we look at some of the most horrific regimes of history and modern history, is the first thing they do is they de-arm the population.
Yeah.
And then if we mix that with one of Karl Marx's doctrines is that, barring everything else, if you could find a way just to take away one significant right per generation, it wouldn't take that many generations to have a totalitarian state and take over.
And think about how many they're taking from us just in this last 8 years. I mean, it's completely unheard of. But you're right about the gun thing. I just they should have made it legal to buy, anti-aircraft missiles and stuff like that, because I mean that's the kind of stuff we'll have to go up against now. Back then,
Yep.
and I carry a gun. I mean, I have a gun. I usually have a gun on me, 90% of the time. And part of that is because I grew up in a border town in Texas, and it was, kidnappings there every day, and it's just kind of a thing that it's like, you never know when something can go down. And if I'm there and I can protect people that are innocent around, I'm going to do it. I'm not so much worried about myself, but I have kids, and you never know what could happen, anymore. So, but
it's definitely part of a suppression and control factor, because again, I know there's very good compelling arguments to take away some of the violence that can happen because people have weapons, but at the end of the day, I mean, everybody knows the criminals and the terrorists.
Yeah, they don't care about laws.
They don't buy the guns from a store, and it's not going to be registered. In fact, they don't want it registered, and they want the serial number gone, and they want it untraceable, and they don't want people to know they have it. So I'm not sure how that affects the true criminal element.
I don't think it can. I mean, look at drugs. I mean, they're illegal, and they're everywhere. So I don't think that's going to matter. But
soon to be legal everywhere. I think.
Yeah. I mean, they'd probably less people do it if it was legal. I don't know. Like, think about it. Mexico and border right there. Just people coming across any way they want, and corrupt politicians, corrupt whatever. It's easy to get stuff in and out of at least our country. I'm not sure how Canada is, but I'm sure it is there too. There's a lot of open coasts, and it wouldn't be that hard. So, but anyways, it's times are coming close, man. There's a lot more we could talk about I guess end time things that are happening right now. Maybe sometime we can do a show just about that. But there's a lot going on, and I think it's important that people just kind of stay knowledgeable about what it is, the spirit behind it. It's not just human. There's a spirit behind it. There's a spirit of demonic influence. There's Lucifer. There's fallen angels. There's Nephilim behind this whole thing, and this is something that didn't come over. It wasn't just a military coup that happened overnight. This is something they've been planning since the beginning. So,
well, and Christianity is the real stumbling block. And I would say all the monotheist religions, but Christianity is the one that they have to tame. And they have to destroy it from within, and they have to be able to get control over the Christians. And they will use all the constitutions that we have weren't designed to protect Christians. That was the sort of superficial text, in my opinion. And they will be used against Christians in the end time to actually enslave us, to imprison us, to persecute us, because we'll be labeled as intolerant and terrorists and anti-state, anti-new order, and certainly anti the universal religion and anti the Antichrist, because Christians will know what is going on, and they won't sit there and just say anything, even though we're instructed to have patience.
At least most Christians will know. Most Christians will know, but there's going to be a lot that are.
There'll be a lot that will be deceived, because we know that Christianity will be taking over. It will have a veneer of a Christian look, so it looks like a lamb, but it'll speak like a dragon. And so
it's already going on in a lot of churches. You got that whole New Age movement moving in, and most people don't read their Bible anyway. I think I saw the statistic that even out of people that go to church, only 20% actually read their Bible. And so, how easy is it for, there's wolves in sheep's clothing. And I would say that sheep's clothing would definitely have to do with pastors more than demonic looking Satan worshipers,
Well, because there's so many moles. I mean, that's part of the plan is to infiltrate with Gnostic moles so that they can deceive the people. I mean, our only protection is to read the Word of God, to read the Bible, to understand what's in it, so that we can't be fooled or deceived or misled. But again, they know that that's not the case. And if you want a classic example of how you take control over religion, just look at what has happened to Islam. Again, some may memorize, but they have no idea, it seems at times, what is written in the Quran, or just refuse to want to admit what's written in the Quran, but they've been told what to believe, and they've been manipulated through all of these hadiths to believe all of the things that the institutions want them to believe. And so
I got Ninja Turtle here.
Hello.
What's up, dude? You wake up out of your bed. I'm talking on the phone right now, but we'll finish up this stuff anyway. But yeah, you're right, man. It's crazy the way it all takes place, and
so if Christians want to heed a lesson, don't be like the Islamic world that doesn't know their scripture.
Yeah.
Or you'll be deceived as they have been.
Yeah. And I'd go further to say they already have been deceived. So.
Well, yes, they have. Yeah, in a lot of cases. Yep.
Yeah. Well, Gary, I would go longer. My son got up. So can you say hi to Gary? This is Levi right here.
Hello, Levi. How are you?
But yeah, man, it was great having you again, and we'll talk again soon. We'll always come up with something to talk about. But I plan on, hopefully I'm going to get with Rob Skiba sometime here soon and try to. I don't know how we could work that out to where 3 people. I could maybe just have you and him on there and talk. I don't know if that's something you want to do or not, but
I'd love to do that.
Yeah,
absolutely love to do that. Yeah,
he's a pretty easy to get along with guy, nice guy. But plan on interviewing him in March sometime, and I'm gonna go to Texas because he's from Dallas area. He's right around where Aaron Judkins and Penny and all them are right there. So trying to make a swoop through that way. My wife wants to go to Texas. She's never been. I grew up in Texas, so she wanted to check it out and might take the family down there. So
be a good trip.
Yeah, it'd be cool, man. I enjoy it. Now, when are you coming to the States anytime soon?
I am, but I'm not sure I'm going to be coming into your area in the next. I'm certainly going to be going through Phoenix in about a month, and then maybe down to Texas, and so I'm going to be down there for about 3 weeks. But
well, let me know, man. I think I'll be there in like March or something. Maybe sooner. It just depends, really, because.
Let me know when you're going to be there, because that might work.
Okay, cool, man. Well, it was good talking to you, man. I appreciate it as always. And
do you think it was?